This poor 6-year-old girl receives a fortune from a millionaire who was about to die. But 3 years later, she is shocked to see a homeless man with a face similar to the millionaire asking her for $1. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The doctor's office was silent when Theodore Manfredini, 67, received the diagnosis that would change his life forever. His hands trembled as he held the envelope with the results, and cold sweat ran down his forehead. The rain lashed against the windows of the building in downtown Oakwood, a town in upstate New York, as if the sky itself shared his despair. 3 months, he murmured to himself, as he walked aimlessly through the town square, the water soaking his Italian suit that cost more than a used car. The man who built a supermarket empire now felt small, insignificant. His thoughts were interrupted by an unusual sight. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, sharing a piece of bread with a skinny stray dog. The girl wore a simple dress, patched in places, but clean. Her black hair was tied in 2 messy braids, and her big, expressive eyes conveyed a kindness that Theodore hadn't seen in decades. She smiled at the dog as if she were sharing a banquet, not her probable only food of the day. "Here you go, mister," the childlike voice surprised him. The girl held out a handmade flower made with colored crepe paper. "You look sad." "Flowers always cheer people up." "How much?" Theodore asked, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. $5, she replied. "But if you don't have it, you can have it anyway. My grandma, Mary Lou, always says that kindness is priceless." Theodore pulled a $100 bill from his wallet. The girl's eyes widened. "I don't have change, mister. What's your name, sweetie?" "Yasmin," she replied, smiling and showing a gap between her teeth. "Keep the change, Yasmin. Buy something for yourself and your 4-legged friend." That night, Theodore couldn't sleep. The image of the girl sharing her bread, even in her own need, haunted him. The next morning, he summoned his best private investigators. He needed to know more about that child who, in a simple gesture, demonstrated more humanity than he had in his entire business life. The reports began to arrive a week later. Yasmin lived with her grandmother, Mary Lou, 64, in a humble house on the outskirts of town. The lady suffered from severe arthritis, but still made handmade flowers that her granddaughter sold on the streets. The girl's mother, Janine, had mysteriously disappeared 2 years earlier, leaving only a note saying she needed to leave. Theodore began to frequent the square every day, buying all the flowers that Yasmin had to sell. The girl always greeted him with the same sincere smile, telling stories about her day at the public school where she studied, about the stray dogs she fed, about her dreams of being a teacher someday. In his lonely mansion, the businessman began to make changes to his will. His lawyer and only friend, Cassius Cass Porter, 59, warned him about the risks of leaving his fortune to a stranger. "You're not thinking straight, Theodore," Cass argued, a wrinkle of concern on his forehead. "Are you sure you want to leave everything to this girl?" "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," Theodore replied, between fits of coughing. "But I need your help, Cass. You will be the administrator of the inheritance until she turns 21. What Theodore didn't know was that behind the mask of concern, Cass hid a sinister smile. For 30 years, he had kept a bitter secret. Theodore had married Maria Isabel, the great love of his life. The marriage lasted only 5 years, ending with Maria Isabel's passing, but Cass's resentment only grew with time. Theodore's health worsened every day. His visits to the square became shorter, but his heart warmed every time he saw Yasmin. The girl, realizing his fragility, began to save the most beautiful flowers, especially for him. "Are you sick, sir?" she asked one day, her voice full of genuine concern. "A little, sweetie," he replied, trying to smile. "Can I visit you? I'll bring drawings and flowers from Grandma's garden." Mom always said that visits make sick people get better faster. The simplicity of those words hit Theodore like lightning. In all his life, no one had truly cared about his well-being. All the people around him always wanted something in return. At the end of that afternoon, after Yasmin left, Theodore had a strong seizure. As he was rushed to the hospital, his last vision was of the bouquet of handmade flowers that the girl had given him, coloring his grey world with a hope that he didn't know he could still feel. Theodore spent 3 days in the hospital. In his private room, Yasmin's handmade flowers were the only color amidst the medical equipment. During the long, sleepless nights, he reflected on how he had become so different from that child he once was, a boy from the countryside who dreamed of doing good. On the morning of the 4th day, against medical advice, Theodore left the hospital. There was something important he needed to do. With slow steps, he went to Mary Lou's house, Yasmin's grandmother. The simple residence with peeling walls and a small, well-kept garden was in a humble neighborhood of Oakwood. Mary Lou greeted him with surprise. Her hands, deformed by arthritis, trembled as she served coffee in an old cup. "You're the flower, a man," she said, recognizing him from Yasmin's descriptions. "My granddaughter talks about you a lot." Theodore observed the modest but clean room. On the walls, children's drawings showed a family of 3 people, Yasmin, her grandmother, and an absent figure labeled as Mom. In a corner, a work table displayed handmade flowers in various stages of production. "Mrs. Mary Lou," he began, his deep voice full of emotion, "I need to tell you something important." During the next hour, Theodore revealed everything: his terminal illness, the decision to leave his fortune to Yasmin, the conditions of the will. Mary Lou listened in silence, tears running down her wrinkled face. "Why my granddaughter?" she finally asked. "Because she reminded me that there is still kindness in the world," Theodore replied, his voice choked with emotion. "But I need you to keep it a secret until everything is officially concluded. There are people who would do anything to prevent it." In the law office, Cass watched the city from the window, his distorted reflection in the glass revealing a bitter smile. On his desk, documents detailed newly created shell companies ready to receive diversions from the future inheritance. His thoughts were interrupted by a call. "Mr. Porter," said the voice on the other end, "this is Vincent Manfredini, Theodore's nephew. I have information about suspicious movements in my uncle's companies." Cass felt a chill down his spine. Vincent, 42, was known for his business acumen. "What kind of information?" he asked, trying to remain calm. "I prefer to discuss it in person. I'm arriving in Oakwood tomorrow." At Mary Lou's house, Yasmin slept restlessly. In her dreams, she saw a faceless man crying, while another laughed in the shadows. She woke up startled to hear a noise coming from the kitchen. It was her grandmother, rummaging in an old box of photographs. "Grandma, is everything okay?" Mary Lou hugged her granddaughter, feeling the weight of the secret she now carried. "Yes, my love, just remembering your mother. Do you think she'll come back one day?" Before Mary Lou could answer, someone knocked on the door. It was an elegant woman, appearing to be in her 30s, dark hair tied in a perfect bun. "Good evening," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Olivia Mendonça. I'm the new financial consultant hired to assist with Mr. Manfredini's business." Mary Lou noticed something familiar in the woman's face, but couldn't identify. What? Olivia, in turn, didn't take her eyes off Yasmin, who was playing distractedly with her rag doll on the sofa. "I came to bring some documents that need to be signed," Olivia continued, her hands nervously tightening her briefcase. "Mr. Porter instructed me to—" Her words were interrupted by a scream coming from the street. A man staggered along the sidewalk, his clothes dirty and torn, contrasting with his haughty posture. When he passed under the light of the lamppost, Mary Lou dropped the cup she was holding. The man was identical to Theodore Manfredini. "Impossible," Olivia murmured, her face losing all color. The stranger looked directly at the window of the house, his eyes meeting Yasmin's. The girl felt a chill run down her spine. They were the same sad eyes of the man who bought her flowers. At that moment, Olivia's cell phone rang. On the screen, a message. "I know who you really are, Janine, and I know why you ran away." Outside, the mysterious man had already disappeared into the darkness of the night, leaving only unanswered questions and an atmosphere of apprehension that hung over the small house. At the hospital, Theodore worsened every hour. In his feverish delirium, he murmured a name that no one recognized. "Daniel. Forgive me, brother." Meanwhile, at the entrance to the city, a sign announced the start of the annual Apple Blossom Festival, unaware that its festivities would serve as the stage for revelations that would forever change the lives of everyone involved in that plot. The next morning, the town of Oakwood awoke, bustling with preparations for the Apple Blossom Festival. The sweet aroma of apple pie filled the streets, mixing with the smell of coffee and fresh bread. Yasmin helped her grandmother organize the handmade flowers they would sell during the festival, but her thoughts continued to revolve around the mysterious man of the night before. "Grandma, why did that man look so much like Mr. Theodore?" she asked, her skillful little hands braiding paper petals. Mary Lou hesitated, her aching joints protesting as she arranged the flowers in baskets. Olivia Mendonca's unexpected visit and the appearance of the stranger had disturbed her sleep. Something in her instincts told her that great changes were to come. In the law office, Cass received Vincent Manfredini. Theodore's nephew, wearing an impeccable suit, carried a briefcase full of documents. "I found irregularities in the latest transactions," Vincent said, spreading papers on the table. "Newly created companies receiving significant amounts, all connected to the same address." Cass kept his expression neutral, but inside his heart raced. "These are normal restructuring procedures," he replied, pouring coffee to disguise his nervousness. "Curious," Vincent continued, "because this address is registered in the name of Maria Isabel Porter. Your deceased sister, isn't it?" The lawyer almost dropped the cup. Maria Isabel was not his sister, but the woman he had loved in secret. The same one who chose Theodore. Vincent was bluffing, but Cass's reaction confirmed his suspicions. At the hospital, Theodore received an unexpected visit. Olivia Mendonca entered his room, closing the door silently behind her. "Or should I call you Janine?" Theodore whispered, surprising her. "How? I have good detectives," he replied, his voice weak. "I found out everything about you, about Augusto, about your reasons for running away." Janine, Olivia collapsed into the chair next to the bed, tears running down her face. "He threatened to hurt Yasmin. He said that if I didn't disappear, he would do something terrible to our daughter. I needed to run, change my identity, wait for the right moment." "And now you're back because you found out about the inheritance?" Theodore asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. "No," she replied vehemently. "I came back because I found out that Augusto was working for Cass, watching my daughter. I needed to protect her." On the other side of town, the mysterious man, who went by the name of Daniel, watched the Apple Blossom Festival from afar. His eyes, identical to Theodore's, carried decades of sadness and regret. Flashback to 30 years ago, two identical boys, separated by their parents' turbulent divorce. Theodore stayed with his father in Oakwood, inheriting his talent for business. Daniel was taken by his mother to rural Pennsylvania, growing up in simplicity and hard work. "I promise I'll find you one day, brother," were Daniel's last words. Before the separation, a promise that took 3 decades to fulfill, only to discover that his twin was on the verge of leaving. In the town square, Yasmin was selling her flowers when a special customer stopped at her stall. It was Augusto Vieira, the security guard hired by Cass, although she didn't know it. "What beautiful flowers," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Your mother liked flowers too, didn't she?" Yasmin froze. Few people mentioned her mother, and something in that man's voice frightened her. Before she could answer, a familiar voice interrupted. "The girl is with me," Daniel said, appearing like a protective shadow. Augusto recoiled, clearly disturbed by the resemblance to Theodore. At that moment, Mary Lou arrived at the square carrying more flowers. Upon seeing Daniel, she dropped her basket. You are Theodore's twin brother," he completed, "and I know all about Cass's plans." At the hospital, Theodore had worsened. The doctors gave him no more than a few hours. In his bed, he held an old photo, 2 identical boys smiling at the camera, a gold pocket watch between them. "I need to see him," he murmured, "one last time." Meanwhile, at the festival, Olivia Janine watched her daughter from afar, her heart torn between the desire to hug her and the fear of putting her in danger. She didn't notice Augusto approaching from behind. "Nice disguise, Janine," he whispered in her ear, "but it won't work." In the office, Cass received a disturbing call. His diversions were beginning to be discovered. In a panic, he initiated the transfer of all funds to an overseas account. His revenge plan was crumbling. Mary Lou, sitting on a bench in the square with Daniel, listened stunned to the story of the separated brothers. The man described how he found an old photo album after his mother's passing, how he tracked Theodore to Oakwood, only to be mistaken for an imposter by Cass. "He knew I could ruin his plans," Daniel explained. "That's why he drove me out of town. But now I have proof, and more importantly, I have the watch." "What watch?" asked Yasmin, who had approached without them noticing. Before Daniel could answer, a commotion swept through the square. Theodore had escaped from the hospital and staggered towards the center of the festivities, leaning on a cane. His eyes met his brother's, and 30 years of separation dissolved in an instant. The crowd watched in silence as the twins met, but not everyone shared the emotion of the moment. Behind the scenes, Cass and Augusto prepared their final move, unaware that Vincent had alerted the authorities, and Olivia, Janine, hidden among those present, gathered all her courage for the confrontation that would change her family's destiny forever. The silence that fell over Oakwood's town square was almost palpable. The colorful banners of the Apple Blossom Festival swayed gently in the afternoon breeze, while 2 identical men stared at each other, separated by only a few yards of worn cobblestones. Theodore, holding himself precariously on his cane, took a step forward. His pale, sweat-stained face betrayed the superhuman effort he was making to stay standing. Daniel, in turn, remained still, his simple and worn clothes contrasting with his brother's expensive suit. "Took you long enough, bro," Theodore said, his voice choked with emotion. "I promised I'd be back," Daniel replied, tears running down his wrinkled face. Yasmin watched the scene with fascination, her little hands squeezing the apron of her grandma, Mary Lou. The lady, in turn, couldn't contain her tears as she witnessed the reunion of the brothers. In the middle of the crowd that was forming, Olivia Janine took advantage of the general distraction to approach her daughter. Her heart beat erratically in her chest. After 2 years of forced separation, being so close to Yasmin was a bittersweet torture. "Keep your distance," a deep voice whispered in her ear. It was Augusto, appearing like a shadow behind her. "Or you know what could happen." On the other side of the square, Cass watched everything from his office window. His hands trembled as he typed frantically on the computer, finalizing the last bank transfers. The plan was crumbling, but he still had one last trump card. "Mr. Porter," his secretary called through the intercom. "Mr. Manfredini's nephew is here with some men from the FBI." Cass felt the blood run cold in his veins. Vincent had discovered everything. In the square, the brothers finally embraced. Theodore, too weak to stand, had to be supported by Daniel. "I need to tell you something," Theodore whispered. "About the inheritance, about Yasmin." Before he could continue, a scream cut through the air. Olivia Janine had freed herself from Augusto and was running towards her daughter. In the process, she bumped into an apple cider stand, knocking over a kettle of boiling water. The hot liquid hit her arm, revealing a birthmark that was covered in makeup. Yasmin's eyes widened. "That mark, it's the same as mine." Mary Lou put her hands to her mouth, finally recognizing why Olivia's face seemed so familiar. "Janine, my daughter?" The moment of recognition was interrupted by a commotion coming from the office building. Cass descended the stairs running, a briefcase in his hand, while Vincent and the police chased him. "You don't understand," Cass shouted, his face red with rage. "Theodore stole everything from me. The love of my life, my dreams, my dignity." Theodore, supported by Daniel, took a step forward. "Maria Isabel chose who to love, Cass. You turned a rejection into hatred, and now you want to destroy the life of an innocent child." "Innocent?" Cass laughed bitterly. "How were you innocent when you stole Maria Isabel's heart? How were you innocent when you built your empire by stepping on small business owners? The great Theodore Manfredini, always thinking he was above everyone else." Yasmin, not completely understanding what was happening, broke away from her grandmother and ran towards Olivia Janine. Augusto, seeing his chance, advanced to intercept her. That's when Daniel acted. With surprising agility for his age, he placed himself between Augusto and the girl. The two men rolled on the ground of the square, while the crowd moved away in fear. "My daughter!" Janine shouted, finally dropping her Olivia mask. "Don't touch her!" At that moment, Theodore staggered, bringing his hand to his chest. His face grew even paler, and he began to slip to the ground. Vincent, momentarily forgetting the chase after Cass, ran to help his uncle. Taking advantage of the confusion, Cass tried to escape through the back of the building, but was surprised by a group of apple blossom vendors who, having followed the entire scene, formed a human barrier. "You're not going anywhere, buddy," said an elderly lady, raising her tray like a shield. In the center of the square, Yasmin finally reached Janine. Mother and daughter looked at each other deeply, years of longing and pain overflowing in tears. "Mom," Yasmin whispered, touching the birthmark on her mother's arm, identical to hers. "Why did you leave?" "To protect you, my love," Janine replied, hugging her daughter as if she never wanted to let go. "But now I'm here, and nothing will separate us again." Mary Lou joined the hug, forming a circle of 3 generations of strong women. Around them, the Apple Blossom Festival continued, but now with a different flavor. The flavor of revealed truths and unmasked lies. Theodore, still on the ground but now more conscious, watched the scene with a faint smile. Daniel, after immobilizing Augusto with the help of locals, returned to his brother. "Did you know?" Daniel asked, referring to Olivia Janine's true identity. "I found out recently," Theodore replied. "But some truths need to choose their own moment to come to light." In the horizon, the sun began to set over Oakwood, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The town square, a silent witness to so many stories over the years, now held another intense chapter in the life of that small upstate town. But the night was far from over. As Cass was taken away by the police, an envelope fell from his coat. Inside it, documents that would reveal an even more complex plot involving not only Theodore's inheritance, but also the real reason for Janine's disappearance 2 years earlier. The envelope that fell from Cass's coat was picked up by Vincent. who immediately began examining its contents under the orange light of the newly lit lamppost. His eyes widened as he read each page. "Uncle," he called, approaching Theodore, who was now sitting on a bench in the square supported by Daniel. "You need to see this." The documents revealed a web of intrigue that extended far beyond the financial diversions. There were records of a private investigation that Cass conducted on Janine 2 years earlier, photos of her being followed, transcriptions of calls. The lawyer had discovered that she worked as an accountant in one of Theodore's companies and had found irregularities in the accounts, diversions that Cass himself had been carrying out for years. "He threatened to hurt Yasmin if I told anyone," Janine explained, still hugging her daughter. "He said he had people everywhere, that no one would believe me. Augusto was his henchman, followed me everywhere. I needed to run, change my identity. It was the only way to protect my family while I looked for proof." Mary Lou held her daughter's hand tightly. "Why didn't you tell me? I would have—" "He threatened you too, Mom," Janine sobbed. "He said he had bought our mortgage debt and would put us on the street if I opened my mouth." Theodore listened to everything with an expression of deep sadness. "All this time, you worked for me and I never knew your suffering." "There was no way you could know," Janine consoled. "Cass manipulated everything, controlled who had access. To you. When I came back as Olivia, I was determined to expose the truth." Yasmin, who until then had listened to everything in silence, raised her bright eyes to her mother. "Is that why you sent those dreams to me?" "Dreams?" Janine asked, confused. "Every night I dreamed of a woman who looked like an angel, saying she would come back to get me one day. She had a mark just like mine on her arm." Tears now flowed freely down the faces of everyone present. On the opposite sidewalk, police were handcuffing Augusto, who had tried to flee during the commotion. Daniel took an old gold watch from his pocket. "Remember this, brother?" Theodore took the object with trembling hands. "Our father's watch. Mom kept it all these years," Daniel explained. "When she passed away, I found a letter explaining everything. How our father separated you, how she was forced to take me, how you ended up with the empire he built." "I looked for you," Theodore murmured. "For years I hired detectives, but Dad had hidden all the records." "I looked too," Daniel replied. "When I finally found out where you were, Cass kept me from getting to you. He said I was an imposter trying to pull a scam. The security guards kicked me out of town." Vincent, who continued to examine the documents, exclaimed, "There's more. Here, Cass didn't act alone. There are records of deposits from a company called Porter and Associates to overseas accounts. That company is in the name of Robert Porter," Janine said, her voice trembling. "Cass's brother, who lives in New York City. He owns a supermarket chain that competes with Mr. Theodore's." The revelation fell like a bomb. Cass's entire plan was not just a personal revenge. It was an elaborate strategy to weaken Manfredini's supermarkets and allow the Porter chain to buy them for a fraction of their value. In the center of the square, vendors began to dismantle their Apple Blossom Festival stalls. The sweet aroma of apple pie still hung in the air, now mixing with the smell of wet earth. A storm was approaching. Theodore tried to get up, but his legs faltered. "I need to fix this. You need to rest," Daniel interrupted, holding his brother. "Let Vincent and I take care of the documents. The important thing now is your health." Yasmin broke away from her mother's embrace and approached Theodore. With the innocence that only a child possesses, she took his wrinkled hand between her small hands. "Mr. Theodore," she said, "do you want a flower? Grandma always says flowers make us feel better." The old businessman smiled, tears running down his tired face. "You know, sweetie, it was because of your generous heart that all this came to light. If you hadn't shared your bread with that dog that afternoon, I never would have—" His voice failed, interrupted by a strong cough. The first raindrops began to fall, thick and heavy. "We need to get him to the hospital," Vincent said, worried. As the ambulance was called, Janine explained to Yasmin and Mary Lou how she had gotten the consultant job, using her accounting skills and a new identity to infiltrate the company and gather evidence against Cass. "I never stopped thinking about you, my daughter," she said, stroking Yasmin's hair. "Every day away was torture." "I knew you'd be back," the girl replied. "The angel in my dreams promised." The rain now fell heavily, but no one moved. There was still much to be said, much to be explained. Theodore, increasingly weak, held his father's watch with one hand and a handmade flower with the other. "Daniel," he called, his voice almost a whisper, "promise you'll take care of them. Promise you'll carry out what's in my will." "Don't talk like that," the brother interrupted. "You're going to recover and we'll—" A thunderclap cut through the night, illuminating the square for a brief moment. In that flash, everyone could see a figure running through the back of the church. It was Robert Porter, who had arrived in town that afternoon to meet with his brother. Vincent immediately alerted the police, who set off in pursuit. The plot seemed far from over, and that night held even more revelations that would forever change the fate of everyone involved. The rain continued to lash Oakwood as the ambulance cut through the streets of the town, with its siren echoing in the night. Inside the vehicle, Theodore breathed with difficulty, but refused to let go of Daniel's hand. "The watch," he murmured between fits of coughing. "Open the watch." Carefully, Daniel manipulated the old golden piece until he found a secret mechanism on the side. With a soft click, a hidden compartment opened, revealing a yellowed photograph and a small folded piece of paper. The photo showed a young and beautiful woman holding two identical babies. On the back, a date and a note. "Maria Isabel, with our sons, the love I couldn't live." "She wasn't your wife," Daniel said, finally understanding. "She was our mother." Theodore nodded weakly. "Maria Isabel was our mother. Cass didn't know. Nobody knew. She married me to be near the son she was forced to abandon." The revelation hit Daniel like lightning. The woman who raised him, who he always believed to be his mother, was actually his aunt. Maria Isabel, the real mother, had approached Theodore so she could be near the son the father had kept with him after the separation. In the folded paper, a letter with Maria Isabel's delicate handwriting explained everything. How she had become pregnant with twins at a young age. How the family forced her to give one of the babies to her sister to raise in the countryside. How the children's father never knew about the pregnancy. Years later, she approached Theodore, married him, but never had the courage to reveal the truth. At the hospital, while doctors fought to stabilize Theodore, the story continued to unfold in town. Robert Porter had been captured trying to board the last bus to New York City. With him, a briefcase containing documents that proved an even greater scheme. "We found records of all the companies that the Porter brothers destroyed in the last 30 years, Vincent explained to Janine, who was waiting in the hospital corridor with Yasmin asleep in her lap. They identified promising businesses, infiltrated employees, created internal problems, and then bought everything for next to nothing. Mary Lou, sitting next to her daughter, held a rosary between her gnarled fingers. "To think that my girl uncovered all this when she was just an accountant." "It wasn't just that, Mom," Janine replied, stroking Yasmin's hair. "I found out they were planning to do the same thing to the small business owners downtown. They were going to buy all the stores, destroy the local businesses that make our town what it is. In the town square, now silent and wet from the rain, the dismantled stalls of the Apple Blossom Festival looked like ghosts under the lamplight. An elderly lady, the same one who had prevented Cass from escaping with her tray, collected the last of her products when she found something shining between the cobblestones. It was an old key attached to a cord with the initials MIP, Maria Isabel Porter. The lady took the discovery directly to Daniel, who was still awaiting news of his brother in the hospital waiting room. He immediately recognized the object. It was the key to his mother's old apartment in New York City, the one she kept secret and visited once a month, saying they were business trips. "She kept all the records," Daniel murmured, "all the evidence. Against the Porters, everything she discovered during the years she worked as Robert's secretary. It was then that Theodore, who had been stabilized, asked to see everyone in his room. His face was pale, but his eyes shone with a different light. "Yasmin," he called softly, waking the girl. "Come here, sweetie." The girl approached the bed, her eyes sleepy but attentive. Theodore took the gold watch from his pocket and placed it in her hands. "This watch," he said, "has belonged to 3 generations of our family. Now it's yours, along with everything I've built in life. But the real inheritance isn't in material possessions. It's in the heart," Yasmin completed, surprising everyone. "Like Mom's love, which even far away never stopped existing." Tears streamed down Theodore's wrinkled face. "Exactly, sweetie. And now you have not only your mother back, but also a great uncle who will take care of you." Daniel held his brother's hand tightly. The decades of separation seemed to dissipate like fog under the morning sun that was beginning to rise. In the days that followed, the town of Oakwood witnessed a transformation. The Porter brothers were indicted for their crimes, and the documents found in Maria Isabel's apartment in New York City helped to dismantle their entire network of corruption. Theodore, defying all medical prognoses, began to show signs of improvement. It was as if the weight of the secrets he carried had been the real disease consuming his health. Janine reassumed her true identity, and with the help of Vincent, reorganized the administration of Manfredini supermarkets. Her experience as an accountant and the knowledge gained during the years of investigation were fundamental to clean up the companies. Mary Lou continued making her handmade flowers, now in a small shop in the center of town, transformed into a tourist attraction after the family's story became known. Yasmin still helped her with sales, but now also dedicated time to a special project, a craft school for underprivileged children. On a sunny afternoon, 6 months after that stormy night, the family gathered again in the town square. It was the beginning of another Apple Blossom Festival, but this time the atmosphere was one of pure celebration. Theodore, leaning on his cane but with a healthy appearance, watched Yasmin playing with other children. The gold watch, now transformed into a pendant, shone around her neck. "You know, brother," said Daniel, standing beside him, "Mom would be proud. Not only for the empire you built, but for the man you became." "She would be proud of both of us," Theodore replied, "and especially of Yasmin, who taught us that the true value of life is in the small gestures of love." Deku. At the handmade flower stall, now much larger and more colorful, Mary Lou and Janine worked side by side, making up for lost time. The sweet aroma of apple pie mixed with the scent of flowers, creating a unique fragrance that would forever be associated with the story of redemption, forgiveness, and love that transformed that small upstate town. And Yasmin, with the wisdom that only children possess, continued to share smiles and flowers with everyone who crossed her path, proving that true wealth is not in what we possess, but in what we share with others.